Hello my dears, welcome to this video. I want to talk about something that for me is very important and very few people pay attention to this. It's basically the difference between magic and magick with a final K. Because a lot of people nowadays in the witchcraft communities, they use the final version. They use Magick instead of the normal word, Magic. And that's because they want to make a difference. They want to basically differentiate between what normal people call magic and what they call magic. But I want to shed light on something here because there's a misconception here. So, I may also read you some of my notes about this. Nowadays, a lot of people in the Wicca communities, and maybe other people who are into witchcraft, tend to use the word magic, like I said, with the final K. And the term magic with the final K was introduced with the pretext of making a difference between what the majority of people call magic and what people of certain groups, cults, and possibly even secret orders may practice. A lot of people believed that the word magic, just the normal word magic, M-A-G-I-C, was only used in association to mainstream witch stories that involve a waving of the wand and then a granted wish. All those mainstream depictions of witches and wizards and all of that. But that whole thing of like waving the wand and then a granted wish, it's basically magic. It is magic, even though it is depicted the way it is, yes, but that's what magic is. It's manifestation. It's just that the particular depiction of witches and wizards in mainstream media was done with an agenda. And it was an agenda of ridiculing them, more or less, or even turning them into villains. And this narrative is nowadays an extension of the old hunt of witches, the old witch hunt, and the prosecution of people who use their manifestation abilities consciously and actively. This is because the evil elites, because there are evil elites, they want humanity to serve them and only them. And for this, the archetype of the magician / the manifester had to be first prosecuted in ancient and medieval times, and later in modern times ridiculed, because torture and assassination and prosecution weren't so acceptable anymore. And because of this ridiculing depiction of the wizards as nothing but make-believe tales in the mainstream media, some people who still practice witchcraft wanted to use the word magic with the final K for their craft in order to differentiate it from that mainstream notion of so-called magic. But those people fail to understand something in regards to the origin of the word magic with a final K. And they also failed to understand the ancient meaning of the word magic as it is, just the normal word magic, M-A-G-I-C. Because if they did so, they would no longer run away from it, regardless of the mainstream depiction of witches and wizards. So first, let's remove the dirt, okay? Let's look into the origin of the word magic with the final K. It's a term made by someone called Aleister Crowley. You might have heard about him. If you haven't heard about him, great. So basically, he was a person who, you know, some people also say he was the great-grandfather or something like that of one of the Bush presidents. Interesting, right? Regardless of that, whether he is or not the grandfather or great-grandfather of one of the Bush presidents, his association with dark forces is undeniable. He was part of certain groups of occultists, and later on he even made his own cult. Some people use other terms to describe it, but it's actually a cult. And to this day, there are people who follow that cult. And that cult is called Thelema. C-H-E-L-E-M-A. And it just so happens that people like Marilyn Manson sing about that. Alright? There's a particular song of Marilyn Manson where he explicitly sings about Thelema. And, you know, I think, you know, those of you who know a few things, you understand by now what kind of person Aleister Crowley is and what kind of people resonate with what he spoke about and what he wrote about and what he created. And one other thing I want to say is that he also called himself the Beast 666. Now, obviously, he's not the beast that is prophesied in the Book of Revelations, but it just so happened that he resonated with that. And another thing, in his cult, Thelema, they literally worship the whore from the Book of Revelations. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, the Book of Revelations is the final book of the Bible. Now, yes, the Bible is currently a means of manipulation because it's been confiscated by the state in the 4th century after Christ, and it's been modified multiple times. And the reason it's been modified was so that it could be used to mentally enslave the masses. But the Book of Revelations still holds value because we're literally living in the times described by the Book of Revelations. And in all of those prophecies from the Book of Revelations, there's this image of a whore. Now, it's not literally a whore. It's a representation of Babylon, the ancient Babylon. And maybe some people will get triggered by what I'm gonna say next, but the nowadays version of ancient Babylon is the United States of America. I don't fucking care if you get triggered by this or not. It is what it is. And it's basically the United States of America and the secret order behind it. And also the nasty beings that order works with. And, those beings want to control humanity and all of that. So basically, this whole thing is what the word magic with a final K is related to. And I know a lot of people in nowadays witchcraft communities, they want to even rebel somehow against Christianity for obvious reasons. And some of them may also do that because in the Middle East they were witches who were either burnt, either hanged by officials of the church. So they have it in them, that trauma of being haunted by people who use the church and the faith in Christ as an excuse of torturing and killing other people and all of that. So I get it to some extent. Those people may have it in them to rebel against Christianity, but this is what I want to talk about and what I want to shed light upon. The fact that throughout the centuries some people used Christianity against humanity. This doesn't mean that Christ himself is to be blamed. It's like literally, I could be here talking about something and I could be doing good stuff, and then I'm dead and someone else just uses my name in my heritage and my fame to do a lot of bad things in my name. Because what I did was good, so they want to use that as the mask for their own agenda. And because what I did was good, people will believe them, at least for a while. This is what it is. And basically there's a whole difference between Christianity, the official Christianity, that's nothing but an institution and a political force throughout the ages, the centuries, especially in the Middle East, and what Christ stood for. Because Christ didn't stand for Christianity, Christ stood for enlightenment and love. So it's a difference. And all those people, who use Christianity as a pretext, it's the same kind of people who use a lot of other things as a pretext, as a facade for their agenda. And I kept talking about hidden agendas in this video. So basically that's what the word magic with a final K is related to people who have agendas, to people who do use magic for bad, to people who use a certain kind of magic tied to evil beings. And now that the misconception is clarified and the dirt removed, let's look at the actual meaning of the word magic, M-A-G-I-C. By looking at its origin, its ancient origin. And this is where language history is very, very helpful. So basically, where does this word come from? The word magic. The root word is Magi. And from Magi, a Greek term was formed, magick, which meant the art of the magus. And from that Greek term into Latin, it became magicus. Then late Latin, it became magica. And Old French made it magick, and from magick, in English, it became magic, as you know it. This is how you trace the history of the word magic. So, looking at the root word, Magi, M-A-G-I, what does it mean? What did it mean in ancient times? It basically had two meanings. One, it referred to an ethnic group. Two, it referred to the priests of Zoroastrianism. Again, you may or may not know what that means. So, Zoroastrianism is or was a religion or a spiritual tradition that was started by someone called Zoroaster, and that's why it's called Zoroastrianism. And he was the first religious figure to talk about a completely dualistic religious perspective, in which there are two main beings, one completely evil and one completely good. And the whole world was basically in a war between those two beings. And from his religion, a lot of scholars say that from his religion, all the other Abrahamic religions developed. So the Abrahamic religions are Judaism, the religion of the Jews, and then from that Christianity, and then from that Islam. And that being said, the priests of that religion, the priests of Zoroastrianism, were called the Magi. And when the Magi got into Greece, the term magick arose. So it's basically M-A-G-I-K-E-T-E-K-H-N-E, magick. And this term is a result of ancient Greek mentality. So the ancient Greeks believed that everyone who practices an art has a techne, a practice. And the way they understood art was a bit different from what we nowadays perceive as art. Basically, almost every kind of creation was seen as an art. Every kind of process that results in the creation of something. Pottery was an art. Sword making was an art. Sculpture was an art. Still is today. Clothes making was an art. So on. And every kind of art had a technique, a method of practice. And that's what they called techne. So when the Greeks were referring to the Magi, it was essential that they too must have had a techne of their own, a technique of their own. So they made the term magick techne, or magick techne. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it right, but I think it is magick techne. So it basically means the technique or method of practice of the art of the Magi. Or just short, the art of the Magi. And later, the term might have very well extended to refer to any kind of mystics who practice their spirituality. And this is why the three mystics who honor the birth of Christ and find him based on the signs of the sky, astrology, and offer him gifts are called the Magi, the three Magi. Again, if you don't know what I'm talking about, it is said that when Christ was born, basically there was a prophecy that the Messiah would be born, and there were some signs that people could understand when that happens. And a few people understood what those signs would be. And basically those signs were astrological. And there were three Magi who looked at the sky and understood those signs in the sky, and based on that they followed them. They followed it is said that they followed a star, and they found him. They found the baby Christ. And they offered him gifts, and there was three of them, three Magi, and three gifts. And interestingly enough, they were sent to trace him so that he could be assassinated. But they didn't. When they returned to the person who sent them, they said that they didn't find him. Interesting, right? So they are called the three Magi. And basically this is the meaning of the word Magi. People who practice spirituality and have a certain kind of spiritual art, a spiritual technique, a spiritual practice. And then from magick the practice, the art, the technique of the Magi, another word was formed in Latin, which is magicus. Now, most probably, magicus just referred to the people themselves, but it could have also referred to the practice in itself. And then in late Latin, it would become magica. Magica definitely refers to the practice. And from late Latin into Old French, magick, and then magic in English. If you want spelling, the Latin word magicus is magicus. Late Latin word magica is magica. Do not argue with me on the pronunciation of these words because my mother tongue is Latin based, so I know how to say them. The late Latin word into Old French became magique, which is magique, and then from that English magic, magic. So that's it. You don't have to add any additional letters to just be different. So literally the word magic means spiritual practice. Voila. So when you're having or doing your spiritual practice, whatever that involves, you're literally doing magic. So yes, in media, in nowadays media, magic is reduced to waving a wand and then a wish is granted. But if we are to look at that and call that by what it is, that's just instant manifestation. Whereas with a more realistic approach on magic and manifestation, you know, we know that in this era, in this dimension, age of humanity, it's not quite like that. It's not instant. Manifestation is not instantaneous. It takes a little bit of time. So, but magic is not just about manifestation. It can very well be about manifestation, but I don't want it to be about that because, you know, it's about spirituality. Just honoring divinity is part of it. And you know, all those people nowadays who are all about manifesting, 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 manifesting. Yeah, okay, great. But in my opinion, they have too much of a material view on things because they're all about manifesting things into the material world. More money, more of that, more of that, more of that, more of that. Which, okay, great. But let's not reduce things to that. If that's all you can, okay, that's it. But life and spirituality is a lot deeper than that. It's about knowledge, a certain kind of knowledge that used to be hidden for ages for a certain reason. It's not just about manifestation of more money and more cars and all of that and blah. What about more depth? That's something more powerful. So basically, again, magic is spiritual practice. No matter what deities you work with and what you do. And as a matter of fact, magic should be free. There is no dogma, there is no, set of rules. Just go with the flow. It's an art. Literally, it's an art. So whatever your intuition tells you to practice, go with that. That's magic. Thank you for listening, and I hope this helped you.